Hi and welcome to this lecture in which I'm going to present two articles. One article which is about to be published and is already published online, and another article which we are writing on now. It's really pity that I'm stranded here uh, in the north of Sweden, flight cancelled, waiting for another flight, because I really would like to have your input, especially on the second article, as this is work in progress, and your opinions really could have perhaps helped us to make a better article. I hope you can send me comments, questions. I've scheduled time from 1 till 2 today when I will be online to answer your questions. I'm also going to talk to Cecilia if I can steal 10 minutes from another lecture when we can talk about this. But we have to do the best of the situation, so here is the lecture. And I'm going to start with talking about the first paper, which is going to be published in Mobile Media and Society. It's already published online there. I don't know if you can access this. If you're interested, just let me know and I can perhaps send it to you. So, first of all, very shortly about mobile phone for development. You have read the chapter for today, Caroline's and mine chapter in the book that I edited together with Vikas Kumar. Here we want to talk about empowerment instead of development. So I'm going to spend some words on that and also return to the dialectical approach that we discussed in the article. In the chapter that you have read for today. And then we're going to talk about the study and the results before we go to the next paper. So very shortly on the background, as you know, you have read the chapter. Mobile phone is the ICT, the information communication technology par excellence in the world today. 2 years ago, 95% of the world population had access to mobile phones. Today is even more. We are closing 100%. And also we see that in terms of mobile phone subscriptions, that the global south or the developing world, I mean, there is no correct way of labeling this. The global south is perhaps more correct than the developing world. But anyway, these countries are leading in terms of mobile phone subscription, which also means that there is a market, if you so wish, for innovations, for products for this particular part of the globe. And this is then the background for this field of mobile phones for development, M4D, which is part of the larger ICT4D circle, which is part of ICTs and international development. So it's within this area that Caroline and I have been working, mostly Caroline, not so much me. Now, in this article, we didn't want to talk about development, though, because it's a very loaded concept, as I'm sure Cecilia has been talked about. So we, instead of talking about development, we wanted to focus on empowerment. Not to say that empowerment is not a tricky concept, because it is. It's very tricky. It's not easy to disentangle, but it doesn't have this modernistic the West is the best, we're going to transfer our ideas kind of baggage that development has. I mean, Traxler, who we cite here, claims that the term development springs from a modernized and polarized worldview, taking the social, cultural, and economic dominance from the West for granted. So, an empowerment is an interesting concept because it does, in a sense, acknowledge the agency and the ability of the people themselves to address their life situations. I mean, one of the more famous definitions of empowerment is from Naila Kabir, who defines empowerment as the process through which those who have been denied the ability to make strategic life choices acquire such an ability. It's very much the capability of the individual user. And do we recognize this? Yes, we do. I mean, I know that sense book is part of the course package for you, so you know all about the capability approach. So in this sense, empowerment and capability comes very close to each other. Sense approach to development as expanding freedoms that lends themselves towards the capacity of individuals, not only to assess, but also have the capability to transform their life situations. Now, in the chapter, we argue for a dialectical approach. Now, Amartya Sen has been accused of having too much of an individualistic view on empowerment, on development, in the sense that he places too much emphasis on the individual who's supposed to be in charge of their situation. Now, we know that this doesn't only depend on individual agency, but also on contextual circumstances. So even though that, so we argue that yes, individual and group agency, we have to take it seriously, but we also have to acknowledge that agency, and if you can indeed assess and change your life situation, is also dependent on contextual factors, such as the country you live in. If you're a woman, patriarchal structures, very important, that's, as we will see here. But also technological affordances and logics. I mean, what are the particular affordances of the mobile phone? So whether then, if we look at M4D, mobile phones for development, and mobile phones for empowerment in this case, it will depend on whether the use mobile phone practices facilitates possibilities for individuals and groups to transform their situations they find themselves in. And also, but we cannot only look at that, we also have to look at how the mobile phone is embedded within existing culture, systems of power, social systems, etc., and social relations. I mean, between men and women. In this particular case, since patriarchy is a big argument in our paper here, but also what kind of practices the phone push for or affords in a nicer concept. Now, if we turn to that, the mobile phone here, the medium, the platform, we know that the mobile phone has improved access to quick information, providing users a tool for communication. Ling and Donner, in their very interesting and good book from 2010, they summarize it as mobile phones affording connectivity, reachability, that we can connect each other, we can reach each other all the time, and individual addressability, that we can address individual per individual who has a mobile phone. It helps us to coordinate everyday life activities. Who will be cooking today? I can call home. Did you go to the market and buy some cabbage for the stew tonight, etc.? The fine graining of interactions between friends and family. We can always reschedule plans because we have a mobile phone. And it also contributes to the maintenance of social cohesions among family and peer networks. So this is what we know about what the mobile phone affords. And when it comes to women and empowerment, we know that the economic factor is very important for women empowerment. And here, of course, the informal economy is very much an argument for why we based our studies in Kampala in the street markets, because it both, is based on agency, that women have to, self-employ basically, as well as structural opportunity and constraints, such as tradition and kinship ties. Now, in the other article, I mean, this concept of the informal economy became very interesting for us, but we will talk about that more later. So the study is set in Uganda. It's a small African country, 35 million people in the middle of Africa by the equator, Lake Victoria. Its capital is Kampala. They will soon have elections, and this is set in Kampala, the capital. 35 million in the whole country, 1.5 million approximately like Stockholm, the city, Kampala. Okay, where's my image? It basically means hills of the impala. Impala, the animal. It's very green, lush place. Kampala. So we and this is also mobile money, the use of mobile phone for transactions. I mean, now in Sweden, Swish is becoming increasingly used and popular. Now, these kind of services have existed for a very long time, at least in 2008 in these countries. So we are a little behind here. The so-called developing countries in the developed world when it comes to mobile banking. So mobile money is very visible in the streetscapes, as you can see in these pictures. Now, what we did here, the study, was that we contracted a facilitator, Moses, here you see on the picture here, who in turn contracted some of his students to conduct a survey. So we did the survey away from Sweden when we were not in Kampala. And then when we came to Kampala, based on the survey, we could organize focus group discussions. And out of these focus group discussions, we could then do visits and ethnographic field observations in the markets themselves. So this is Moses, and this is some of the field assistants we had helping us to compile the survey. And then we organized, when we came down to Kampala, focus group discussions. So we set up a little in a location near to the markets where women can come, and we would talk to them about their mobile phone usage. And this is what it could look like with the women showing their phones, and even women managing their business as they were at the focus group interviews, texting and doing things with their phone. And then out of these focus group discussions, as I said, we organized field trips, ethnographic field observations to the market. And there are 3 markets we focus on in the article. The Nakawa market. Here you have pictures from the Nakawa market. This is one of our informants in blue here, Annette. She sells water. And we indeed helped her with selling water. We did so-called participant observations. Here you can see me helping some women with polishing shoes, sewing, washing dishes. Now, the rationale for participant observation is that you should get some kind of in-depth understanding of the situation. Well, this was, I mean, it's highly unlikely that I got that from helping them a little bit with that. I mean, they live under harsh conditions, of course, as at the same time that they are not the poorest of the poor, but they are poor. And they thought it was a lot of fun to have a Muzungu, a white person, help them. And also when I sold water for Annette, for example, I mean, I actually think I increased her sale because everyone wanted to be served by a Muzungu here. So I was very good at selling water, I must say, if you may allow me to do that. So I have a career, perhaps, if academia fails me. And here is also, where are we? Here is also Caroline, my co-author, helping to grind peanut butter, peanuts for a particular sauce. And here we are with some other informants. And the other market we visited was Kalewe, which is also very big. It's also on dirt ground. Without any protection from sun and wind and water. And here are some more images of our informants. You see, many of them were pregnant. As I said, patriarchal structure is very important here to understand these women. And in this particular case, it seems like in Uganda, and this is also what Caroline has told me, and we read some articles about it, that in order to be considered as a woman, you need to have children. So many of these informants were pregnant. And then finally, the biggest market on them all, and perhaps also the most centrally located, is the Wino market. What we could see here is also that the more formalized structure was pushing in towards the more shack-built market. Here we see Wino in Wino. This is the ham shopping ground. So we could see attempts to formalize these markets, something that then inspired us to write the second article, so we will return to that. And here we are. Here is Caroline with some of our informants talking to women here selling clothes. Okay, very shortly, the result of this article. I mean, I wanted to go into the second article. This is where your opinions matters and we need your help. So very quickly on the results. I mean, what we argue for here is a situated approach for empowerment. Now, these women, I mean, mobile phones can be very helpful for these women through mobile money payments. They can use this to transfer money to snowball customers, to have contact with their children, etc. Contact middlemen. I mean, all these things. The mobile phone is very good for them in their business. So they are, in that sense, it can empower them. But at the same time, the mobile phone was also used to surveil these women. So especially by their partners. They were also very jealous. If some middlemen or suppliers contacted them on the phone, they could get into trouble with their boyfriends or husbands, etc. So what we argue for in this article is that, I mean, yes, in some situations they are empowered, and the mobile phone helps them in this to run their business, to run their business away from the location, etc. On the other hand, it's also framed by patriarchal structures, in the sense that the idea that technology is male and that men are in charge of the phone if there is only one phone at home, etc. So and also it was also used to control them by their men. So we argue that yes, it can be empowerment, but it can also be disempowerment. We cannot talk about this as a constant, they are empowered or not. We have to look at certain situations. In certain situations they are empowered, in other situations they are not empowered. All right. So I mean, if something is unclear here, if it went too fast, I'm here to answer questions, even though it will be digitally. I'm sorry for that. If I cannot come to the classroom, I'll talk to Cecilia about that. So now let's move on to the second article. Now, when we went down there, to Kampala, we were particularly interested in looking at empowerment, but and we had many arguments from the World Bank, from SIDA, from all these different academic sources that the informal economy is very important for women. So we use this concept of the informal economy to justify the setting of the study, the market women. Now, what we, as I alluded to here, is that we could see when we were here an increasing formalization of the informal market, which led us to think like, there is something that we need to study more in depth here. Can we really see this as an informal market, and what role as a informal or formal economy, and what role here does the mobile phone play? So this is the second article that we write upon here, and I was in November down again to Kampala, and I did some additional observations and interviews for this article. So we're currently writing up that one. So we'll talk a little bit about this, the informal economy, the market, talk a little bit about the results and the conclusion we wish to draw here. And yes, here I'm particularly interested in your views and comments. Well, the informal economy. Well, what is often used, what this term is used to define is the uncontrolled side of the economy. The bazaar type of street economies, markets, often found in developing cities, different from economies and corporations we find in the West, that is audited, is controlled, is taxed by the government, etc. And here this is based on Han and Hart, economic anthropologist here. So this is the informal economy, how it's defined. The informal economy it's argued for by World Bank reports more than 1.8 billion people. So it's not a marginalized sector. It's very big. As I said, it's been argued that it's used to empower women. I mean, women that do not have so much access to formal education and to formal employment as men because of patriarchal structures. This is a way for them to maintain themselves, to earn their money. So it opens up possibility for segments outside of the formal to earn their living. An article that we read from Sana Tawa, who studied markets in Cameroon, she claims with pretty solid backings that the informal sector accounts for 90% of the jobs in Cameroon, in this particular country. And according to some state reports in Uganda, it's argued that 43%, and this is then probably an underestimation since this is official reports, 43% of the total economy is the informal economy, and it's also claimed to be the biggest source of employment in urban areas. But the argument that the informal economy should not be regulated, audited, or controlled by state or official, we say that this needs to be a little bit nuanced. We don't know if this is actually true. We claim here that the informal economy is becoming increasingly formalized. So what we ask ourselves here is, isn't it the case that the formal and the informal economy, that the formal economy indeed likes the informal economy, and that there are close ties between the formal and the informal economy? And when we started to dig into this, we could find accounts that this is indeed the case, that they are interlinked and interconnected. Alter Chen, here an author, argue that the informal economy should be viewed not as marginal, well, obviously not marginal since it's the basic source of employment in many of these countries, but a basic component of the total economy. So they depend, the formal, if you so wish, the state depends on this informal sector. And one author that I find particularly interesting here is Kanjal Sanjal, an Indian economist, Marxist economist, well, influenced by Marxist theory, even though he criticized Marx a little bit. He argues, I mean, he doesn't talk about the formal or the informal, he talks about the informal as a need economy, existing at the periphery along with in international market capitalism, the capital industrial sector. And he defines the need economy as a wide range of traditional archaic systems of production as an integral part of the global network. And he also talks about this as the leftovers of capital arising, a post-colonial wasteland. He's of course very critical of this. He has some interesting ideas of how to look at the relationship between the formal and the informal. We also wanted to look at how this formalization how we can see that in these markets in Kampala, and also the mobile phone. And I mean, we know, as we talked about before, I mean, there is a lot of ideas of how far the mobile phone can be helpful in the informal economy. Access to finding information is important, contact with middlemen, etc. And also, as we concluded in the other article, we know that women are very dominant in the informal economy. They have been prominent market players for a long time, and mobile phone phones. It's our own study and others that have argued that we can have communication, trade, and social, removing middlemen, etc. As well as they can, coordinate their business work and home activities at the same time. Okay. One way we saw in these markets was state efforts to formalize them. As I said, these commercial structures here, and this is just on the corner of Ueno, that they try to force women to move into and then pay rents to have their selling there, and then also to control them. We could also see that even though this was supposed to be informal markets, these women paid taxes. I mean, how can you pay tax if you're not state controlled? Not only to the state, but also to so-called landlords. And these landlords seems to be, I mean, for obvious reasons, we didn't get to speak to so many of them, but it seems like these landlords are in some way connected to state officials. I mean, this can also be corruption, of course, that these state officials allow certain people to make money in these so-called informal markets by renting stalls, making them pay, etc. At the same time, in Naxala, for example, we saw cases here, the capital, Kampala's capital city authority, the municipality, if you so wish, they coming and cleaning the markets, and then the women told us that they had to pay taxes for that as well because they came and cleaned them all. So, I mean, how informal are these? You can clearly see state presence here and municipal presence. And there were also efforts from the state to push them out from the outdoor markets into more of these kind of structures. And when I was back now in November in Nakawa market, they are building more and more of these here. So it's really and conscious efforts to replace crudely built shacks or markets in the open into these so-called markets. And there were also in order to for women to be have the possibility to do this, they had to have money for that, and there were many loan sharks in the running around in the markets, and their connection to the city was also very dubious in the sense that, I mean, we don't, I mean, for reasons they didn't want to talk to us, but for obvious reasons. But it seems here that they were also somewhat connected with, well, Jennifer Mazizi, I mean, the head of the KCCA, the municipality here, in order to facilitate and force these women into this more formalized structure. Yes, loan sharks and other factions. Not all. I mean, there were also clear cases of free-floating loan sharks that were there to make money of these women. There were also many cases of markets being burnt down. Now, we don't have any proof of this, but there is, of course, suspicions that this burning of the markets had clear political purposes, because I mean, this is pictures from Ueno market, has been, burnt down pretty much once every year. And this is also, of course, pushing the women's away from this market and then, into other sections of the into this more modernized building. So this, of course, was also an attempt to get them away there in order to take over this type of the land. And to be clear here, the women themselves didn't point any fingers as these and these were behind the burnings, but of course we can have our suspicions who will benefit from this and for what would this lead to, and then you could have a clear suspects who would be behind these burnings. So what is the role of the mobile phone here? Well, on the one hand, we could also see how mobile money, the use of mobile money, was transforming these informal economies in interesting and hybridized way, in a sense that transactions were pushed away from the street. They could snowball customers to each other. They could send pictures of their produce. I mean, they knew that a customer needed new shoes for the school uniform for her girl. They would get in a type of shoe. They would send picture. They would say, yes, we like it, negotiate price, then buy the shoes, and then, you know, ship it, put it on a bus, or send it on Bora Bora on a motorbike with some of the local men there, perhaps even their partners who were often Bora Bora motorcycle, moped riders. So in many cases, these customers only came to the market once, and then they changed phone numbers, and then, you know, they were dealing with the business. So there is on one hand this hybridization of the street market to make it less street and more about transactions, and here of course the mobile phone is of vital importance. Also these monthly loans, rentals, and taxes that they had to pay, that was part of this, I mean, of the formalization, if you so wish, of the informal market, was paid by mobile money. And in a way, you can say that this made the payments transparent, and there was indeed an accountability. People were being, when they could see that the money had been sent and had been received, they could not be fooled. On the other hand, you know, this could also be used to control the women, of course. We will return to that. So we have the mobile phone communicating with customers, with suppliers, managing the private life, the saving circles. I mean, they were also saving money, like microfinance, and they used mobile money for that. So they were like small banks among the women, friends, colleagues. So they saved money, put money in every month, and once every 5 times 6 months, one of the women would get all the money in a way to save for school fees, etc. And it was also a way for women to communicate with landlords or officials, but also the other way around. It was a way for state official or city officials, as well as these so-called landlords, to control and communicate with the women. Yeah? And one very interesting practice here is the SIM card registration. I mean, a quite recent legislation that means that every SIM card needs to be registered, and also the registration for mobile money. Um, so this means that all of the women who had SIM cards were also registered by the state, and hence could also be monitored by. I mean, we all know about the NSA scandal in the United States and Edward Snowden, and here we also think about the staggering amount of personal data accumulated here. And can also be connected to recently national ID registration exercises that also increases the state's control of the citizens. So in the sense, you could also see how women. I mean, the mobile phone is. I mean, as with empowerment, is not either or. It can be used to control them, but it can also be used to combat this. I mean, we take the burning of the market, for example. The women could snowball messages with chains of mobile phone numbers they had set up, etc. So they could challenge this. These things, as well as they also could, in a sense, the very use of the mobile phone, how they used it and how they conducted their businesses, was also in a sense pushing it more into being about the transaction and less about the street market, challenged the so-called informality of these markets. Yeah, you can also see they were with this SIM card registration, a lot of spam messages followed, and they were very annoyed about that. At the same time as mobile phones created opportunities for regulations, yes. So as I said, we're still struggling a little bit with this article, the final conclusions, etc. And yes, your opinions, your ideas is very valuable, but I mean, I guess our tentative conclusion here is that we need to veer away from this dichotomy of the formal and informal. And just as I mean, I didn't mention it here, but it's very clear if you look at international aid organizations like such as SIDA, the Swedish one, and the World Bank. This is a very alive and kicking concept, and it's often used as in reports in order to combat poverty. I mean, in poverty alleviation ideas and policies for poverty alleviation. If you look at this World Bank, International Aid Organization, this idea of an informal economy and how beneficial this is for this, especially poverty alleviation. I mean, this concept is very strong and powerful in that sense. And we argue that, well, we need to not perhaps use this concept and veer away from this dichotomy. And we are thinking about different ways of doing this right now. A suggestion of how we could label this formal, informal, and look at different types of formal, informal markets. We have to consider the variations in the regulation and state interventions in relation to this. And also find a clear way to see what the media here, the role that the mobile phone actually plays, and how to conceptualize this in a perhaps more clear way than I was managed to present here. In order to get an analytical concept that better capture the nuances and the complexities that we studied here. Yes. And I still cannot get away from how unfortunate it is that I'm not there to talk to you in person, because I think that you have many good ideas to share with us. But do please email me. I will be online the whole afternoon. You have my email address. I will try to be on Skype as well from 1 to 2. So please contact me. Okay, take care.